What's up, everybody? Teacher Torres here, School Your Brain. I'm going to show you an easy way to find the greatest common factor of two numbers. And this is going to be using something called the Euclidean Method. So if you've been taught, like for example, the prime factorization method, you have to be really good at your multiplication facts. And if you're not good at that, this method will help you with that. All you really need is a basic four-function calculator. And I'm going to show you the process to find the greatest common factor, also known as the GCF. In other words, you're going to find the biggest number that can divide into two different numbers. And this is useful if you have to simplify fractions, for examples, which is very common when you're working with numbers. So let's get started. So I'm going to show you two numbers. I'm going to do 48 and 56. Actually, let's put it into a fraction format. So I'm going to put 48 over 56. Right, so it's a typical problem. They say reduce it or simplify it. They mean the same thing. When they say that, they're saying find the greatest common factor. Find the biggest number that can divide into these two numbers. So that's the thing. Question mark. I don't know. Let's say I'm not good at my multiplication facts. If I was good at it, I'll be able to recognize it. But I'm going to show you this method that you can use to actually find that. So on the side, what you're going to do is you're going to take the bigger number. So the method requires you to take the bigger number of the two and divide it by the smaller number. So I got 56 and I'm dividing it by 48. So you can use this method to divide it out. And what I'm going to do right now is, you could even pull up a calculator if you need to. 56 divided by 48, you get 1.16. We're only going to take the whole amount, the whole number, which is to the left of the decimal. In this case, it's a 1. So I know 48 can go into it only one time. Because if it goes twice, you're going to go over 56. So now I multiply that together, subtract, and my answer here would be 8. And I'm going to repeat this division process by taking the bigger number here and dividing it by the remainder, the smaller number in this case. So now 48 divided by 8. 8 goes into 48 6 times. If you're using a calculator, you can see I take 48 divided by 6. So take the number inside the box divided by the outer number, and we get 8. So you can see there's no decimal, meaning there is no remainder. And you can see here, because when I multiply it, I get 48. When I subtract that, nothing remains. This lets you know that the biggest number that can divide into 48 and 56 is 8. That is called the GCF, the greatest common factor. So all you do is use this method until the remainder is 0. Once the remainder is 0, then this number right here that I'm circling, highlighting, is 8. That is your greatest common factor. So now I'm going to go back to my fraction, and I'm going to divide each number by 8, which gives me an answer of 6 over 7. And that right there is my simplified fraction. I'm going to try another example where you can see that we have to repeat it more than once. So you can see and hopefully get the hang of how to use this method. Alright, let's try another problem. We're going to find the GCF, the biggest number that can divide into 160 and 96. In other words, they might ask you in the directions to simplify the fraction or to reduce the fraction, which means find the biggest number you could divide each of these by. So that's what I'm looking for. What can divide into 160 and 96? So I'm going to use the Euclidean algorithm again. So I take the bigger number, divided by the small number, 96. And if you need to use the calculator, you can, right? I'll just do 160. Oops, let me clear that. 160 divided by 96, and we get 1.6. So I take the whole amount, which is the number to the left of the decimal. It only goes into it once. 1 times 96, I get 96. And then when I subtract this, I get 64. And then I repeat the process. So again, we're looking at these two numbers, the 96 and the 64. So I take the bigger number of the two, divided by the remainder, which is 64. And I just divide it again. So if I go into calculator, again, you can use the calculator if you need help with the multiplication facts. So I just do 96 divided by 64, and that gives me 1.5. So I just take the whole amount, which is 1. 64 times 1 is 64. Subtract it out, and we're going to get 32. And then I repeat it again. So I look at the divisor, 64, and the remainder is 32. So again, bigger number divided by the smaller number. And 32 goes into 64 twice. And if I need the calculator, you can see 64 divided by 32 is 2. So make sure when you're dividing, is one thing I want to point out, is that the bigger number, right, if you're dividing in this case, you take the order matters. So the number inside the box here, 64, you have to take that first, divided by the number on the outside, which is 32. Order matters when you're dividing numbers. Alright, and you can see here when I multiply it out, I get 64, and when I subtract it, my remainder is 0, which means that my final answer, or not final answer, but the greatest common factor of 96 and 160 is 32. So that's always going to be true. When your remainder is 0, that number here is going to be your greatest common factor. In other words, your biggest number that could go into 160 and 96. Now I go ahead and divide each of these by 32. And I can see, if I go in here, 160 divided by 32 gives me 5. And then the second one, 96 divided by 32 equals 3. So my final answer in reduced form is 5/3. Again, this is called Euclidean algorithm. So hopefully this is something that's going to help you out when it comes to simplifying fractions, or when they say to reduce the fraction, or to find the greatest common factor of any two given numbers. Do me a favor, if you like this video, you already know what I'm about to say, hit that like button, subscribe, and leave a comment and let me know what you want to learn next.